Details remain sparse, but the reaction has been predictable and depressing. You've seen all the usual dumb people on television leveraging the moment to make scripted partisan points or boost their cable news ratings, as they invariably do. CNN blamed Trump for, quote, inciting a serial bomber. Jeff Zucker, head of that channel, tried to draw a connection between the president's dislike of the media and acts of terror. In other words, this is what happens when you criticize us. It went on like this all day with maximum self-righteousness.
Our president cannot escape special scrutiny. He is at the head of the hate parade, and way too often.
The president has seemed for 2 years not interested in trying to detoxify the environment, but rather pour gasoline on the fire.
I blame the rhetoric out of that building, out of the White House, and it comes from the top, the president of the United States.
To say there is no connection between what Trump has said about Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Eric Holder, John Brennan, and CNN, and the thinking of the person who sent those pipe bombs is foolhardy.
At his rally last night, the crowd shouted, "Lock her up," when he mentioned Hillary Clinton's name. All of it seemed normal. And in fact, it was. This is all normal now. Two parts of the same country that despise each other so much, there's almost nothing one can't imagine the other doing, including encouraging acts of terrorism. This is ominous. We're not supposed to hate our fellow Americans this much. The question is, how did we get here? And there are lots of reasons. Our leaders made a series of terrible decisions and never apologized for them. The middle class died and nobody noticed. New technologies that were supposed to unite us instead drove us farther apart. A rotten education system, disintegrating families, shocking rates of substance abuse, all of those played a role. There were other factors too. But more than anything, our thinking changed. That's what really happened. Over time, we stopped debating politics, issues, and ideas, and we started attacking each other for things we can't change, for who we are. Take immigration. 20 years ago, we'd be arguing about how many migrants to admit into this country, under what circumstances, whether or not it was all good for America. None of that is seriously under discussion today. Instead, we get moments like these.
What is happening here is a sin against God. I believe that.
The hypocrisy of all people of faith in our country not to clamor for this, for what the administration is doing to end.
Those who selectively use the Bible to justify this cruelty are ignoring a central tenet of Christianity. Jesus said, "Suffer the little children unto me." He did not say, "Let the children suffer."
A sin against God. What you're hearing is not political debate. It's theology. It's not based in reason, but in something deeper, something less predictable and more ferocious. It's a religious argument. Those are not resolvable. That's why you were told not to start them at the dinner table. Religious disputes push people into extremism. If I think your ideas are wrong, I'm happy to argue with you about them. But if I decide you're evil, I may be tempted to hurt you, if only in self-defense. Politics like this isn't really politics. It's sectarianism. And ultimately, it's an incitement to violence. Months ago, we invited Congressman Beto O'Rourke of Texas onto this show to discuss whether the United States should provide free health care to illegal aliens. Now, there are two sides to that question. There always are two sides to political questions. But O'Rourke couldn't even see the other side. He saw only callousness and sin. Watch.
I think there's an interest in making sure that if someone is going to be sick, if someone needs help, that we deliver it in the most efficient, effective, cost-effective way possible.
Oh, so it's cost-effective to pay for the health care of people here?
Yeah, I mean, you can pay for it in the emergency room.
How about not paying for it at all?
Yeah. Well, then you can watch people die in your community and in your country.
Yeah, I must be a mean person for not being in favor of it. Congressman, thank you for joining us. Beto O'Rourke is not stupid, but like so many in our political class, he has adopted a habit of mind that leaves no room for legitimate disagreement with his own views. If you're opposed to paying for health care for illegal aliens, you're in favor of watching people die. You're morally corrupt. Why would anyone waste time trying to reason with a monster like that? Would you debate human rights with Idi Amin? Of course you wouldn't. You already know where he stands because you know what sort of person Idi Amin is. Facts are irrelevant. His character and motives are all that matter. And increasingly, that's what we argue about, character and motive. Watch this exchange with Congressman Adam Schiff of California. The question we raised was whether we know conclusively that the Russian government hacked John Podesta's email account during the 2016 election. Schiff happens to be one of the few people who might know the answer to that. He's the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Watch how he responded. Can you look right into the camera and say, I know for a fact the government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of John Podesta's email?
Absolutely. The government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of our institution and the dumping of information.
Of John Podesta's email.
Not only in the United States, but also in Europe.
Okay, you're not, you know what, you're dodging.
And Tucker,
no, look and say, I know they did. John Podesta's emails, they hacked those.
And I think that Ronald Reagan will be rolling over his grave at your carrying water for the Kremlin.
I'm not carrying water for the, you're a sitting member of Congress on the Intel Committee, and you can't say they hacked.
You're gonna have to move your show to RT Russian television. Because
in other words, Schiff replied, I don't care what you're asking. The question is why you're asking it, and the answer, of course, is because you're a bad person, in this case, a traitor to your country. Increasingly, most political conversations look like this. When we want to defeat someone we disagree with, we no longer argue against what they believe. We wait until they make a mistake, until they say something stupid, even unintentionally, and then we pounce. We don't consider their explanation. We refuse to accept their apologies. There is no forgiveness. The point is not to make things right or to improve anything. The point is to vanquish an enemy. Now, it should be said it's not just Democrats who do this, though obviously they do lead the category. Lock her up? That's not something any politician can do or should do, even to Hillary Clinton. Criminal guilt is for courts and judges to decide. It has to be. And what about this? The Reverend John Kasich. He's the Republican governor of Ohio. Watch him explain that when you disagree with him, you are really disagreeing with God.
We've got to start putting ourselves in the shoes of other people. We've got to start thinking about the consequences that others suffer. And if we've been spared those by the grace of God, let us be appreciative. Let us count our blessings. And let us reach out to those who have less. And let's stop putting up walls around ourselves and not understanding the plight, the trouble, and the problems of others. It is not right, and the Lord doesn't want it. And our people, at their hearts, want to reach out to others. Look at what they do in these storms. They go and they rescue people they don't know. They put them in their homes. They feed them. That's America.
The Lord doesn't want it, says Pastor Kasich. Well, maybe Father Kasich is right. It's really hard to know. What's easy to know and to foresee is what happens to a country where the people in power claim moral authority they don't have in order to compel you to obey. What happens? Resentment builds, factions form, craziness starts to seem normal. It is all bad. And if you want to fix it, stop talking like this. Mark Steyn is a best-selling author and a very smart man, and he joins us now. Mark, is it my imagination, or are many of our political debates, in fact, theological debates all of a sudden?
Yes, you said there are two sides to every question. That's how it should be. On an ever wider number of subjects, there are not two sides, which is why it seems entirely normal to these people that when you, on a day when there are 10 so-called pipe bombs that fail to go off, almost everybody in the establishment thinks the answer to more violence is less speech. The answer to more violence is never less speech, and it's to restore, in fact, the idea of two sides to every question. You can't say, as the left increasingly does, on any number of issues, that on immigration there's one side, there's the virtuous moral side, and on the other is the evil side. That's true for gay marriage, that's true for climate change, that's true for Islam, that's true for transgender bathrooms, that's true for an ever wider range of subjects. And when you do that, in fact, you do incentivize violence, because if you say to people, you can't talk about this, then there's nothing left except to shoot up storefronts and lob bombs through windows. To hear people, including Republicans like Mitt Romney, quite shamefully calling out vigorous, open speech, which actually we need more of. We need to expand the borders of speech in this country. We don't need sensitivity training. As a Canadian friend of mine always says, in a fractious society, you actually need insensitivity training. You need to train people to have vigorous debates and not get to the point, whether it's on left or right, where you get obvious jokes, whether in bad taste, obvious vulgarities, are things that drive people nuts and call for people to stop tweeting and all the rest of it. We actually need more speech. If you don't want days like yesterday, you need more, better, more vigorous free speech.
Well, I mean, I'm doubting you've noticed the irony that as the sensitivity department at the heart of every corporation becomes more powerful, the society becomes less sensitive and crueler. One of the many ironies. But how do you debate someone who believes he's already won the debate by virtue of his personal virtue?
Yes, I think that's a key point. When I got into difficulties in Canada with the human rights guys over hate speech, and I actually won that, and we got a law repealed because I pushed back. But I well remember a minister of the Crown up there saying to me that a cabinet minister, saying that the object of this was to, quote, denormalize, unquote, me. That's why these guys on the left and the Islamic guys were doing this, to quote, I'd never heard that word before. But I think that's actually what's happening here. That if someone disagrees with you about immigration policy, about climate science, about transgender issues, then you denormalize them, you dehumanize them, you delegitimize them. And once you've done that, you're actually on the same continuum to saying it's okay to punch their lights out or shoot them up. That's the danger of that.
Right, because they're not even human at that point.
Yeah.
Mark Steyn, thank you, as always, for rooting us in reason. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Well, at least 10 suspicious packages have been intercepted by authorities across the country so far, and a sprawling investigation is underway to determine who is behind this, who sent them and why, and if there are more packages on the way. Former FBI Deputy Assistant Director of Counterterrorism, Terry Turchie, knows a lot about this subject. He joins us tonight. Terry, thanks a lot for coming on. So, without speculating in an irresponsible way, but from the facts that you are aware of, what does this add up to? What does it tell you?
Well, I do feel this is probably some sort of lone offender. I don't think this is going to involve a group. I think it's somebody that has clearly been planning it for a while.
For investigators to look at, wouldn't there be?
There definitely is. And when you look at these cases, and as I think you used the word earlier about sprawling, they are sprawling and they can become even bigger. So what you have to do almost right at the beginning is you have to prepare to and hope that you can get a break in some of the key areas and solve these cases immediately, or that you start doing everything as you should do it, and then lay the foundation if you have to go forward and if you have to become even bigger as far as manpower. So you look at essentially two things, and they're pretty simple and pretty basic. There's strategy and structure. The strategy of all of these incorporates the forensics trail, the investigative trail, the analysis trail, the handling of public tips, and then going back out to the media as we did in Unabomb. And we don't have the time, but you could take every one of those categories and go back to other bombings, and we could illustrate how that has been helpful. And that's why we concentrate on those areas. And then the structure is how you collect it all and bring it together, and like panning for gold, separate all the garbage from the nuggets that have to go through the process and lead you to the people who did this.
So really quickly, there are an awful lot of bombs, none of them went off. What does that tell you? Were these designed to go off or just to terrify?
I have a rough time when I have to start speculating on it, so I'll try to say it like this. There's a lot of possibilities, and people are talking about all kinds of theories. But the bomber this may be a person who's just started doing this, so they don't really know what they're doing or how to put together a bomb. Possibly that's the case. They could be somebody who didn't want the bombs to really hurt anyone. That's probably a stretch. I don't think any of these people think that way, because I don't think any of them care if they hurt anyone. And then you could get into the real political stuff. Is it a Republican? Is it a white nationalist? Is it a Democratic type sympathizer? Who knows?
Right. We don't know. But it is interesting.
Exactly.
I think. Terry, thank you very much. Great to see you tonight.
You're welcome, Tucker. Thank you.
Well, the federal government will be deploying nearly 1,000 troops to the southern border as many thousands of Central Americans make their way toward the United States. Sheriff Mark Daniels oversees 80 miles of border in southeast Arizona, and he joins us tonight. Sheriff, thanks very much for coming on. So
Thanks, Tucker.
Will these troops make a material difference, do you think, in the crisis that we've been covering for the past week with this migrant caravan?
I do. It sends a message. It sends a very important message that we're not going to let people just come to a border that they see as vulnerable, they see as weak, and that's why they're coming. I mean, they could claim refugees out of Mexico and stop there, but no, they're coming all the way, another 1,000 miles all the way up into our southern border because it's a vulnerable border. What I see, Tucker, is our congressional folks, Republican, Democrats, Independents, pointing fingers, our congressional leaders. Nobody's solving this issue. Why the men and women on the front line of this, the federal partners, our state law enforcement, our local law enforcement are standing by doing everything we can do. And it's tough. It's a challenge.
Okay, so if you were in charge, obviously you've spent a lot of your life thinking about this problem, and it's right in your neighborhood. What would you do?
Well, the first thing we got to do is this. I've worked this southern border for 34 years. I've seen the evolution. I've seen the successes on the border. I've also seen the failures of it. What we got going for us right now, what I think is very, very positive, is the collaborative efforts from state, local, and federal law enforcement, the executive branch, that are working so closely. It's the best it's been in my 3 decades when it comes to best practices on the border as we come up with community plans, federal plans that complement each other. And that's so important. What we need, we got a president that's actually out there in front saying we need to have a secure border, which I 100% agree with. What we need is our congressional folks, our elected and our national leaders to say, let's complement that too. Let's be part of this because this is a policy, this is a legal issue that needs addressed.
Right. So I need to ask you this question, since you live there and have, as you said, been involved in it for almost 35 years. In Washington and New York, this is framed purely as an ethnic issue, as a racial issue. Is that how people in your county see it, or is it more complicated maybe from their perspective?
We don't see it like that. You don't hear that kind of talk on the border. You just don't hear it.
Yeah.
You hear it everywhere else. But on the front line where we're dealing with it every day, 34 years, I've never even seen a complaint on a deputy or a law enforcement officer on the board that's based around race. We just don't see that. What we see is a community working with law enforcement at all levels, trying to come up with solutions to stop the flow into our country, to enhance that quality of life on our border and throughout this nation. That's what we see down here. And what the rest of the country doesn't see is the violent aspect of this too. Give you an example. Last night, my deputies that work within a border team were out and chasing smugglers. They found one of the smugglers. They had a physical altercation. That's the stuff you don't see. It's a vulnerable time here at the border. And these criminal transnational organizations that are pushing these drugs and this human smuggling, which I call modern day slavery, into our country, they don't see that. We see that. It's a very vulnerable and dangerous game.
Yeah, no one mentions that here. Funny. Sheriff, thanks very much for your perspective. Great to talk to you. No, they don't. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.
Up next, it was a very bad day for creepy porn lawyer. If you're looking for major breaking developments in the CPL saga, you're on the right channel. We'll be right back.
The Swetnick's allegations made by Mr. Avenatti about you true?
Those are not true. Never met her. Don't know who she is. There's a letter released within 2 hours of that breaking yesterday from, I think, 60 people who knew me in high school, men and women, who said it was, their words, nonsense, totally, the whole thing, that's totally ridiculous.
None of these allegations are true?
Correct.
Well, the Senate Judiciary Committee has referred creepy porn lawyer and one of his clients, Julie Swetnick, whose name you just heard, to the FBI for alleged conspiracy to mislead Congress during Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation hearings. Creepy porn lawyer and his client claimed without evidence that Kavanaugh was involved in a very long series of gang rapes, 10 perhaps, that happened decades ago in suburban Maryland. A short time ago, CPL spoke about the potential criminal investigation into him. Here it is.
We welcome the investigation requested by Senator Grassley, who obviously has no idea what he's just done. What he has effectively done is he has now opened up a Pandora's box, and my client and I are very much looking forward to a full and complete investigation into my client's allegations.
Creepy, but undeniably brash. But unfortunately for him, that is not the only bad news he received today. CPL also blew up his presidential campaign completely by suggesting in an interview with Time magazine that Democrats should nominate a white man for president in 2020. That's obviously not allowed in today's Democratic Party. Mr. Porn Lawyer previously was seen as a frontrunner for the Democratic nomination 2 years from now. Senator John Kennedy serves on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he joins us tonight. Senator, thank you very much for coming on. So if you would mind explaining to us what this criminal referral is about, on what basis you made it.
They're very serious allegations. The committee is alleging that Mr. Avenatti and Ms. Swetnick violated Title 18 of the United States Code, basically conspiracy, making a false statement, obstruction of a Senate committee. Basically, the basis of the allegation is that Ms. Swetnick and Mr. Avenatti said that Ms. Swetnick had personal knowledge that Judge Kavanaugh spiked punch with drugs and alcohol, that Judge Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh, fondled women, and that Justice Kavanaugh raped women. And Ms. Swetnick said she had personal knowledge of that. Then when she gave interviews to the news media, she recanted most of that testimony. The Judiciary Committee interviewed 10 witnesses trying to corroborate Ms. Swetnick's allegations. None of them could, quite the contrary. I don't know whether Ms. Swetnick was just a pawn or not. The FBI will find out. I don't know Mr. Avenatti. Based on my relationship with him through the committee, just on what I've observed, he clearly has a casual relationship with the truth. And it appears to me that he will do the right thing, but only when constantly supervised and cornered like a rat.
So what you're saying, if I'm interpreting this correctly, is that there's no evidence that these 10 gang rapes took place at which Julie Swetnick says she was president.
None.
And that because none, it's been looked into, but she swore that under oath. So this is going to be the one case in my memory where someone actually gets punished for lying to a congressional committee under oath.
Well, and this is serious because we want people who are victims of sexual violence to come forward. But if someone comes forward and lies about it, that undermines the legitimacy of the allegations that are valid. And at one point, when it was clear that there were no corroborating witnesses, Mr. Avenatti alleged that he had a witness and would present a sworn statement, but he would not tell us the name of the witness. Yeah. And I will tell you, it was a turning point in the hearing.
I think that's right.
I think that even if you ask the Democrats, when Mr. Avenatti entered the picture, it was clear we were getting into the foothills of the preposterous.
I live there, so I didn't even notice. Senator, thank you. The foothills of the preposterous. Great to see you tonight. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Well, what do private jets, country clubs, luxury hotels in Paris have in common? They are all things that New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez leveraged his influence to get for free. He might lose his re-election bid as a result. We're going to speak to his opponent after the break. Like the herd animals they are, that they largely overlooked were the real surprises of this cycle. And we don't know what's going to happen, but here's what we do know. There is an actually competitive Senate race in New Jersey. That's a blue state if there ever was one. Recent polls show a single-digit margin between Democratic incumbent Robert Menendez and Republican businessman Bob Hugin. The close race is in part the result of Menendez's behavior while in office. Federal court documents describe, quote, specific corroborated allegations that Menendez and a donor had sex with underage prostitutes in the Dominican Republic several years ago. He strongly contests those allegations. Prosecutors also pursued a bribery case against Senator Menendez. It centered on favors that he performed for a donor who let him ride on his private plane, paid for expensive hotel rooms in Paris, gave him access to a private golf course in Palm Beach, among other things, and then, of course, contributed generously to Menendez's campaigns. Federal prosecutors in the end failed to convict him successfully on those charges, mostly because the Supreme Court narrowed the standards for what constitutes bribery in America. Earlier today, video of Menendez supporters ripping out lawn signs surfaced on the internet. Here it is.
Y'all don't live here. Y'all don't care. Y'all don't live here, bro.
Ripping out lawn signs and littering, we should say. Our rule generally is we don't have candidates on right before elections because we don't put our thumb on the scale too much, but this is such an amazing race. We couldn't resist talking to Bob Hugin. He's the Republican running against Menendez, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Hugin, thanks very much for coming on. So this race has received relatively little attention.
Great to be with you.
Thank you. The alleged corruption against Menendez got also relatively little attention. Do you think his behavior is one of the central issues in this race?
Absolutely. When we started this race, Tucker, less than a third of New Jerseyans even knew that he had been indicted by the Obama administration. And then when he went on the Senate floor and was pontificating about when will America listen to women, and here's a sworn FBI affidavit that talks about these very specific allegations and corroborating evidence. And in that same release in the Department of Justice materials, said when we confronted you with these allegations, you lied, demonstrably false statements about the allegations. So lying in the top of the sexual misconduct, the people of Jersey deserve to know that.
No, they do. In fact, I edited the first story on that, and he called me a racist on some grounds for running that story. But it turned out, I think, to be really clear and true. So what you're saying is there are enough Democrats in the state who find his behavior abhorrent that they might vote for you, a Republican.
Well, you know, Tucker, the race, the momentum is so palpable and clear. We're in a statistical tie right now. And some polls, internal polls, have us with a slight lead. Slight other polls we've seen, other people had us in a tied. So it's really in the margin of error right now. And the momentum is so clearly on our side. People are realizing New Jersey can actually do better. And I'm a Jersey guy. I was born here, raised here. We raised our 3 kids here. I only left to join the Marine Corps. And so, you know, the momentum is so clear. People of Jersey want better. They deserve better. And we're going to give them better on November the 6th.
The state is controlled by Democrats, not exclusively, but largely. Are you worried that it won't be a clean election? Do you think you can get a fair shake in the election?
Well, you know, I'll tell you, Tucker, we believe that we want all fair elections, and we'll have actually challengers. I think it's 6,000 precincts in New Jersey. For the first time in a long time, Republicans will have challengers in every precinct to make sure that we have the kind of election that Americans deserve. And we hope as many New Jerseyans get out to vote as possible, especially the momentum we have with, and I had another very significant Democratic endorsement on Wednesday. Tomorrow I'm going to get a very significant Hispanic endorsement that had previously been in Senator Menendez's camp. So the momentum on independents, Democrats, and Republicans obviously is just tremendous. And so we're surging at the right time. Things are looking good. 12 days left to go. It's all going to be down to who gets the vote out, and we're committed to making sure that happens.
We'll be watching. Pretty amazing that guy's still in the U.S. Senate. Pretty shocking. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's a disgrace. Thank you. Time now for Final Exam. Can you beat our news experts in remembering what happened this week? How's your short-term memory? We'll see how theirs is after the break. Time now for our special Political Masterminds edition of Final Exam, where news experts compete with one another to see who's been paying closer attention to the news over the last week. This week's contestants, Fox News chief national correspondent Ed Henry, and from the Washington Examiner, ladies and gentlemen, Byron York.
I've been off most of the week, so I haven't followed the news.
He's already making excuses.
I love the preemptive
By the way,
excuses. You're about to play golf, and you say, "Oh, you know, my back's really sore."
It's very clever.
I bought a lot of Christmas gifts early, and I'm going to get them signed after the show.
Did you really? You read 5 editions of it.
So if there's a close call.
There's a close call.
He's trying to buy this thing.
He's already paid for it. It doesn't matter. All right, hands on buzzers. I ask the questions. The first one to buzz in gets to answer the question. You have to wait until I finish asking it before you answer. A key rule. You answer once I acknowledge you by saying your name. Each correct answer worth a single point. Each incorrect answer detracts a point from your total. 1st to 5 wins. Are you ready?
Ready.
Or best of 5, isn't it? You said 1st to 5.
You see the point. Let's not get too technical.
I just want to make sure.
Ed's a detailed man. I like that. All right. Question 1. It was a contentious few years between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, but the two apparently have made up. Earlier this week, the president gave Cruz 2 new nicknames. Name one of them. Ed Henry.
Texas Ted.
Texas Ted, one of the new nicknames. Is that correct to the tape?
To me, he's not Lion Ted anymore. He's beautiful Ted. He's Texas. I call him Texas Ted.
Nice. Beautiful Ted or Texas Ted?
Both are true.
Both are true. Good. I'm not wagging. Question 2. All right, first goes to Ed Henry. There was a record-breaking lottery drawing. It was a Mega Millions jackpot. It was worth $1.5 billion. Only one person won. Which state does that person live in? Byron York.
South Carolina.
South Carolina. Is South Carolina correct?
True.
Someone in South Carolina is in the money. The Mega Millions drawing late last night has produced a winner.
You don't have to reveal
and of
your
course,
name, right?
tens of millions of losers.
By the way, you have greater odds of dying from falling out of bed than winning the lottery.
I'm not
or being
interested
bit by
in
a shark.
Amazing. Okay, so when you have these special political masterminds edition, you know it's going to be close, and it is 1-1.
Ship of fools, elbow everywhere.
Elbow everywhere. Look, you can't suborn the judges. Question 3. A replica of the world's most infamous passenger ship due to set sail in 2022. It will follow the same North Atlantic journey as the original ship from England to New York. What's the name of that ship? Ed Henry.
Titanic.
Titanic. Not Lusitania, Titanic. Is it Titanic?
Titanic 2 set sail in 2022. The replica has the same cabin layout as the ill-fated 1912 ship, of course with modern technology and safety procedures. It traces the same North Atlantic journey as the original, from Dubai to England and on to New York.
So the judges are saying, begrudgingly you win. They say that technically the name is Titanic 2.
Yeah. But I thought you said replica of what ship?
I was unclear in my question, therefore you are technically correct, but they want to rub in that you're not actually correct. Exactly.
I guess, wow.
They're mean.
Forget it. Don't buy Ship of Fools, whatever.
Oh, now they're saying the score remains 1-1.
What?
That's what they're saying. Look, I don't.
Can you repeat the question?
I'm powerless. Look, it's the judges, okay?
You said replica of what ship? So it wouldn't be a replica of Titanic 2.
It says, what is the name of the ship?
You got to throw it out.
Oh, I know. It's
a
cool.
do-over.
So they're giving you, they're cutting the baby. Okay, question 4. As required by the Game Show Commission of Poughkeepsie, New York, we now ask our weekly animal question, and it's multiple choice. A popular video on the internet shows a farm animal in Ireland singing like a human. What kind of animal was it? A goat, B, a chicken, C, a donkey? Ed Henry.
C, a donkey.
That's one of those questions you either know it or you don't. Does he know it?
Finally, we have a musical donkey. Yes, you heard it right here, folks.
How did you know
I just said donkey.
I saw this. I was home. I was off on Monday and Tuesday.
Well, it turns out that was your strength. You said it was your weakness.
I have another idea, too, that I'm not going to tell you.
Okay, so question 4, rather 5, final question.
No.
You have an extra question?
No, this is the final question. We just had question 4.
Oh, right.
If you tie it up, we have a tiebreaker, and it's the long-standing traditional tiebreaker, and if you watch the show, you know the answer. This is a multiple choice, final question. There's a thief on the loose in the UK, caught on camera stealing a case of beer. People say the thief looks a lot like a character from the 1990s sitcom Friends. Which character was it? A, Monica, B, Chandler, C, Ross? Ed Henry.
Ross. It was on the 5.
Man, you spent a lot of time watching TV at home.
I love the 5.
Is that correct? Was it Ross?
Do you recognize this accused beer thief? Some people think that they say it looks like Ross from the show Friends.
Yes. You are just a savage animal. You're unbelievable. For the win, Ed Henry.
I'm giving the books back because you wouldn't give me that one. I don't even want these.
I mean, you got to see that almost, right?
Byron York and I are staring at you with jaws agape. How did he do it?
Well, this is what happens when you spend all your time reading Russian depositions.
Exactly right. When you spend your time
watching.
Get out of here.
All right, so you win the Eric Wemple mug, the commemorative mug that reminds us of the pivotal moment in this show's history when Eric Wemple of the Washington Post website came on the show and deeply enjoyed himself. Enjoy your coffee with that. Byron York, thank you. It was awesome to see you, as always. We will see you soon. That's it for Final Exam tonight.
Don't leave me hanging.
You tune in to the news each week. See if you can outwit our experts next Thursday. We'll be right back.
VisuWorks can do.
Those living in Great Britain will no longer see the phrase fake news in official documents, the British government banning the phrase because it's poorly defined and misleading. Think about this. The minister is now encouraged to use misinformation and disinformation instead. Magna Carta and all of that in the dustbin, apparently. Joining us now to take up the national left-wing media's blaming President Trump for the suspicious packages without even so much as a howdy do. Joining us, Candace Owens, Communications Director for Turning Point USA. Great to see you, Candace.
It's so great to be here. Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm just stunned at what I have witnessed. The CNN with they basically laid in fonts on their lower thirds, in their graphics, in their narrative, the blame for 10 suspicious packages on President Trump. It's breathtaking to me. Your thoughts?
I agree with you. It's absolutely breathtaking and it's dishonest, which we have come to know that is what that network preaches, dishonesty. And it's especially rich coming from them and their rhetoric of constantly accusing the American people of being racist, of being Nazis, of drumming up so much hate. And now they want to turn and point the finger at this administration, which has been trying so hard to bring the American people together despite the media slandering them.
And your reaction, I mean, to a media that is now just wholesale going after the president in the run-up to an election. There's not even I'm sorry, we've got to do this from them. The president of CNN, Jeff Zucker, attacking the president. He's gone places I've never heard of a network president going.
You know, I try to look at this glass half full. Honestly, I'm really optimistic about it because it's actually showing the American people what's really going on. I mean, there's no doubt now that this is a propaganda network, and their propaganda is run constantly 24 hours a day against the president and against this administration. And he is correct to call them fake news.
Yeah, in this UK ban on fake news, I love the fact that a country that we consider our closest ally is authoritarian, banning. The language police are here, and it all matters to them. Fake news is too honest, and misleading or misinformation is just more palatable. I guess it's the favor of the Latin derivative.
Well, I think what it really reveals to me is that the relationship between the government and the media is a little too close over there. And the government has gotten so big that they want to make sure that they can control the information that's going through the media. And they want to ensure that the people believe everything that they're reading and they never question it. And that's terrifying. And hopefully that opens some minds to realize that they are not really free over there. They are not free to criticize the press.
And when it comes to the PC police in this country, we have a united left-wing media enforcing as best they can, along with the left of the party, of course, the radical Dems. Candace Owens, always good to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Candace Owens. On Wall Street today, stocks closing much higher. The Dow up 401 points, the S&P up 49, the Nasdaq 210 higher. Volume on the big board, heavy trading continues to the upside. A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. Up next, more promising news for Republican candidates just 12 days from the midterms. Ed Rollins joins me right after this. Stay with us. Here now to discuss the latest in the midterm races and the positive movement for Republican candidates, top strategist for Great America PAC, former Reagan White House political director, Fox News political analyst, Ed Rollins. We're seeing some closing. I want to start with, well, go ahead. Let's go to those races where you think we're seeing some improvement for the Republican Party.
Well, Pat Morrissey against Manchin is really closing up, and that's a race that Manchin was in a state that was overwhelmingly for Trump, but he was a strong candidate. He'd been the governor, and people didn't think he could be beat. Morrissey's now ahead in an internal poll. Hogan in New Jersey is closing that gap to such an extent that the National Democrats have had to put $2.8 million into Menendez, and plus $3 million last week. The whole campaign is there. So you got Hoogan is spending $27 million of his own money. It's closed that race up. Holly over McCaskill, and John James is starting to close up in Michigan that nobody thought. So they're getting close. They're all within range of being victorious.
And are the Republicans putting money into those races to back them up?
The best I know, they are. At least they're working hard. They're having a little more trouble in the House because the Democrats, people like Bloomberg and others, are pumping tons of money. And the problem is, you get this late, there's not much you can do with the money. It's all, the TV is already bought.
Who has the best ground game around the country, do you think?
I think the Republicans do, and I think clearly the RNC chairman who was on your show last night has done a fabulous job putting the ground game together, and they deserve a lot of credit for that.
I want to get your sense on something, and that is the focus here in these last few days. Suddenly today, we've got everybody focused on quote-unquote suspicious packages, obviously intended to influence the direction. We don't know by whom, toward whom, but we know the effect, and that has been to take up all of the oxygen in the airwaves.
Away from the caravan. I talked to McCarthy, the majority leader, today, and he's in Florida, and he said basically in their races down there, the caravan was a big issue, obviously, in Florida. And now, again, it's now about the caravans and what have you. So they've got to get it back to those kinds of issues that matter to ordinary voters.
Looking to the Senate race down there, Bill Nelson, the incumbent, is he strengthening?
He's strengthening. The reality is.
How about, let's turn to the governor's race real quick. DeSantis, where is he with Gillum?
DeSantis is having a hard time there. DeSantis is not running a good campaign. My sense is that Scott can beat Nelson. And I think DeSantis